Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the next episode of StreamTime Sports. My name is Chris Stone. I'm the community lead. And unfortunately, today, I'm not joined by our CEO, Nick Meacham. But that's not going to stop me from bringing the hot fire today. Although Nick is taking some well-deserved time off before we're full speed for the SportsPro Media Summit, which, if you're a listener to the StreamTime Sports podcast, you should be attending our annual biggest event hosted in Madrid every single year. It's going to cover all the topics that we cover in the StreamTime Sports podcast, but in much more detail with industry experts, lots of people to meet. If you listen to last week's podcast, you heard from our guest, Dave Guinan, the people that he's met, the relationships that he's built by attending these events. It's certainly something you should not want to miss. And speaking of the SportsPro Media Summit, over the next couple of weeks, Nick and I have had the opportunity to interview a few of our key speakers for the event. This will be a great opportunity for you, if to get a little bit of an insight into what we're going to cover over the course of the 2 days in Madrid. This includes interviews with Sky Deutschland, Tubi. We're also going to speak to Paris Saint-Germain. It's me trying to do my best French accent. We're also going to be speaking, hopefully, to Tim Cocker, the YouTuber who purchased the French rugby rights for their Division 2 football, to talk about how we're going in the creator space and them not just being content creators, but also broadcasters themselves. So the next couple of weeks, we're going to bring you some content solely dedicated to the SportsPro Media Summit to give you a bit of a taste of what you can expect by attending the summit in Madrid. But for today, we're going to look back on some of the sessions we had at our SportsPro AI event in London at the London Stadium. There's a couple of sessions we're going to bring to you today. The first one is all around how AI is being implemented, case studies between broadcasters and streamers. That session was moderated by the legendary Peter Hutton, who's been in many roles across the sports industry and an incredibly intelligent individual. He's also joined by Dave Gibbs at Warner Brothers Discovery, Louise Lawler at Eurovision Sport, and Mihir Wallawalker of Live Like. It's a really great conversation. We all are kind of aware of AI, but knowing and understanding how some of these major broadcasters are implementing AI, this group, the four speakers, they give you lots of examples of different ways of how we're seeing AI here. So it's a really great conversation, one you should certainly tune into. And then the second one is an interview that I did, so very close to my heart. It's not every day that you get the opportunity to interview the former number one overall draft pick in the NBA, Greg Oden. He's certainly the tallest speaker that's ever been to a SportsPro event, but it's honestly just a great conversation. Greg, being a former NBA guy, he was very honest about his role with AI. And, he's not going to be the tech expert, but it's a really great story to hear from someone going through a career transition. And, we talk about athletes getting involved with tech investment all the time now. So to hear from him sort of what his transition is from NBA superstar to tech investor, it was a really great opportunity for me to get to sit down with him. Also, two great people representing the great state of Ohio. So that interview will come after the first one with the different broadcasters. So from here, I'll hand things over to Peter Hutton and the conversation that he had.
So my homepage on Macs will be very different than your homepage, than your homepage, than your homepage. And all of that is based on the signals that we are picking up from our customers around how they consume content and the way that they consume content. So if you're more attuned to watching live sports, we will present you with live sports. We can go deeper. If you're more of a tennis fan, we'll present you with tennis. If you watch a little bit of sport, but you watch a lot of movies, we'll lead with Superman with a bit of sport. And you get the picture, right? So really, we are investing quite heavily in how we optimize that content discovery experience for our customers. I mean, I'll give you an example of what we're doing with video. So we've just launched a new version of Max, which uses a lot more video within the carousel and on the homepage to promote a series. So what the machine will do, the machine will identify 6 or 7 drop-in moments to that show, and then we'll present our marketing and merchandising team with those moments. They can then pick them before they were having to watch an hour, 2 hours worth of a show, 3-hour movie, and identify what those moments were. So that's one example of how we're kind of improving that efficiency.
Right. If I can just follow up from those answers a little bit, I'll start with you, Dave. Louise talked about using the automatic translation tool. Clearly, something like WBD, you're in multiple languages in all sorts of markets. What would hold you back from using automatic translation?
I think it's that quality threshold, right? I think that's the kind of number one. And then two, we have established workflows. We have established workflows that have been in place 4 years. And there is a cost to changing those workflows. The video workflow is very complex. There's no one standard. So actually going into that and changing anything is not as simple as it's perceived. So then it comes back to the ROI. So the quality threshold and the ROI, really.
And Louise, for you, the question would be, working for a group like Eurovision, you've got all sorts of different stakeholders there. How much of it as a challenge for you is to bring people up to speed? You have the vision of what's possible, but you're dealing with a whole load of very conservative stakeholders.
Yeah, I think to what Dave said, it absolutely is the case. I think the concern around quality is there, and the EBU obviously represents the members of public service broadcasters across Europe. And there is quite a bit of reticence around that and nervousness around the quality of the AI tools. I think where Eurovision Sport has the advantage is we're at such an early kind of stage in our evolution. We're able to take those risks, and with the boxing as the example, we only found out that we had rights in India quite close to the event. And their team was super strong, and we knew that there would be engagement. So we thought, right, how can we activate this quickly? So I think, and then from the ROI perspective, we knew that we would get engagement, and it was a very efficient way for us to deliver it. Sourcing Indian commentators who specialise in boxing, all of the challenges that you face as a traditional broadcaster. But I do think that I see anyway myself in the industry, people are really interested more now in the case study. They want to see what's working, what isn't working so well, so that they could truly assess the risk against the investment. Because, we've talked about the evolution of AI for, it feels like, quite a few years now. I want to see it working. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I want to see it, in action. And when you watch it in action, you engage with that content, whether it's personalized feeds or, gamification or all the AI tools you have available. If you're able to watch it and engage with it, and you see the level that it's getting to, it's never going to be perfect, right? We know that. We know that there's human intervention required on quite a few of the tools still. But if you accept that risk, and I think the younger generation are much more open to accepting the risk. I think as long as you're really transparent about what it is, sometimes it's actually attractive to younger people, where they find it quite interesting to go and see what AI is doing around their events. And so for me, I think there is plenty of opportunity. I think the risks are still there, absolutely, and for public service broadcasters, often the risk is too high. At this stage, but I think, we're lucky in that we can embrace this technology and really trial it and push it and see how far it can take us, because ultimately personalization, localization, they're critical to engagement now. And you've got to be able to serve the fans the content that they want, not that, you might think they want, that it's the stuff they're actually going to engage with. And I see that's where we've got to get to.
Right, I'll come to you later, Mahir, if that's right, because I want to just follow up on that, Louise. You talked about case studies are the best way of selling the story. So who's got a good case study? Who do you think outside your own work environment is using AI well? And you can't use Dave as the example.
It's an interesting question. As a middle-aged woman, I am obsessed with trying to engage younger generations now, because I think with a lean-back service that I grew up with, unfortunately, subscribers and engagement audiences in that market are going to be dead in 20 years. So we've got to figure out, how do we engage the next generation? Because if we don't have a business, right? And they don't necessarily have a lot of money, but they can drive engagement, and the way that they consume is so different now. So I love what Nickelodeon did around the NFL Super Bowl, because the NFL were challenged by a drop-off in engagement with the younger audiences. And what they did around the Super Bowl, like the first one was phenomenal, the big splash and everyone was obsessed, and then it was SpongeBob. And to me, it's really using kind of AR and AI, obviously, but to drive an entirely different feed. So it's appealing completely to a different audience. Formula One do it really well as well. And I think, federations and governing bodies are seeing that they do have to start targeting younger audiences. And I think that's where Mahir can come in again. But gamification is critical to that group. And how do they don't want to sit back and watch, they want to be involved. And, we're all now trying to think of ways of how do you get the audience more involved in the content through gamification, through them being able to personalize feeds, through, watch-alongs and creator-led content, because that lean-back service, as I said, it still has a place. There's no doubt in my mind that live sport, trumps almost everything else. But it's about how do you offer an additional feed, either they watch the main feed on their phone. I always think of it that they're watching the main feed on the TV. And my nephew flipped it completely in my head the other day because he was like, no, I watched the match on my phone and I watched the creators on the big screen. I was like, yeah, you do. So that's what's happening. And I think we as broadcasters and as content creators have got to move into that realm if we're going to keep the engagement levels high and justify the subscription fees.
So Dave, two questions for you then. One is just following on that, talk about how you used gamification, because you clearly have used it very well within WBD, but also a third party that you're impressed with.
So we were talking about this, one of the questions backstage was like, who are you impressed with? And I said Wimbledon, and I've just looked up the next panel is serving up AI innovation with Wimbledon and IBM. So they are going to be able to tell the story far better than me. But I think from that perspective, I'm coming at this from as much as a product person as a sports fan. Like, I like context, right? There's all of this data that we can collect now, but it's what does it mean and why does that matter to me? And actually, I think the work that Wimbledon have done with IBM in taking some of that data and that advanced data they're picking in and then being able to tell the stories with it, I think is really interesting. Right? If someone is serving, their return percentage is X, well, what does that mean? Like, is that more than where they were? Is it less? What does that predict? And how does that tell stories? And I think from a fan's perspective, you want to understand more and you want to be told the story. So I think, I think what they do is really impressive. I mean, I think coming on to the gamification piece, we're all in the engagement game, right? We all want to keep people hanging around for longer. We know if they stay for longer, they consume more. If they consume more, they spend more money with us and they're less likely to leave us, right? So we're actually working with LiveLike and this product on, how do we, and this is more on our kind of web products at the moment rather than our streaming service, but how do we engage fans for longer? And what LiveLike provides us with is a set of tools that allows us to do things like polls and predictions and quizzes and that kind of stuff, automated. Now, it clearly needs a human to check that it's the right thing and it's engaging and valuable for our fans. But that type of thing where, here's a story, here's a video, like here's a related game about that, here's a quiz or a poll or a prediction, just very simple stuff that keeps you engaged. I mean, some of my ex-Sky colleagues are here and they do something very similar within their live blogs. That type of thing just keeps the user there for longer. It doesn't take a huge operational or editorial effort to do. And you can monetize it, right? And and that's what we're in. We're in the engagement game, and the longer we can keep you there, the better. And the simpler that is, that's a good job for us. And it's a good partnership with LiveLike. I'm not just saying that because he's here.
Yeah, I mean, even when I was at Meta, we did a lot of A/B testing where we said, okay, we give a poll to X amount of people and no poll to Y amount of people. And you clearly saw those engagement metrics go up once they'd chosen a side or chosen a position, which obviously is food for you, Mihir. But rather than have you talk about how great LiveLike is, who else is doing it well? Who do you get impressed by?
I'll give two examples, one at a macro level and one at a micro level. As a consumer myself, I'm really impressed with what Google is doing just because it's infusing AI into every product that we use every day. So AI to summarize your emails, AI to compose your emails. Now they've just introduced the operator agent in the Chrome browser, so that'll drive adoption more because I feel like Apple and Google in the consumer space are just best positioned to drive widespread adoption because it doesn't change my habit. I don't need to download a new browser, an AI browser. Chrome is bringing AI in it, and that's going to let me experience for the first time what an operator agent is going to do on my browser versus me downloading a new browser and being an experiment on it. So, and that's sort of been our thesis as well. We want to drive workflow automation. I mean, Dave mentioned that what the biggest hindrance to adoption is going to be that you have established workflows. So how do we bring the innovation, these AI capabilities in those existing workflows is what's going to drive most widespread adoption in our industry, at least, at the very least. And at a more like in our technology level, I'm a huge fan of Cam AI. I think you guys are working with them. Their CTO, Akshat, is a genius. A young guy, came out of Apple, and just like on it, like just give a problem statement, solves it. The use case is obviously translation, but it applies in many, many different ways. I think in our industry, in broadcast, now there's federal governance. You have to have subtitling for people who can't hear. And so subtitling as a federal requirement can be solved through AI. Historically, that might have required a lot of resources. That becomes suddenly the cost has dropped significantly. So I feel like those are the types of use cases. They are micro innovation. It's not massive change in stuff, but how do you drive more efficiencies, operational efficiencies, and that'll over time free up the editorial teams to think more creatively. And what else can we be doing in changing the broadcast? Like Louise mentioned about the slime meter with Nickelodeon or whatever, right? Like it's because they weren't focusing on it, or if hopefully others will be able to do same thing because they're not focusing on the everyday stuff that can be solved by AI.
You showed us the Genie example earlier. So you're in a world now where you're having to pitch these services to broadcasters. What's the response genuinely like? You've clearly got believers here, but in the broadcast industry as a whole, are people looking to take on these solutions? Is it a difficult pitch or an easy pitch?
Honestly, once people see it, and they can, I think that from a pitch perspective, making it relatable to their day-to-day lives is what makes the most difference. Now, our board member asked me the same question when he saw our press release, like, is this actually going to drive impact? And my response was, I hope so, but it won't happen until people actually start using it, and behavioral change is difficult. Getting people to adopt something that is not part of their day-to-day routine is difficult. So I think everything that we have done from an integrated workflow standpoint is already being used. If you were spending 30 minutes coming up with a question bank for trivia, the right answer, the wrong answers, the two other wrong answers, and spending 30 minutes on it, and that's now being done in 3 seconds, of course you're going to use it. It's just, it's self-preservation, right? Like just making your life easier. The Genie is more of a standalone product offering that allows you, it's more like an operator agent, which is going to require meaningful effort from a partner to start using it day over day, where we are spending time on it. And I think this is the part that's resonating most with people. If I came to you and I said, Peter, you're doing this job, I'm going to help you do your job better, that's a personal choice. You can decide whether it works for you or not. Where we are focusing on is actually coordination. It's more, enterprises are messy, right? Like you have siloed departments, editorial, product, marketing, BI, they all have to work together. And that part is where things fall down mostly. So Dave might want to launch something, but the editorial team may not be totally ready to adopt it. And hence the feature can get launched. Now, if these agents can actually do that job for you, so the editorial agent and the analytics agent and the marketing agent are all in unison at all points in time, that, to me, is the biggest impact. It's not single-use agents. It's those agents all talking to each other and this network of agents working together.
Dave, is that fair of the world that you have to work in? Is there a separation between digital and editorial that you need to get across?
So yes, to an extent. I mean, we're all kind of after the same thing, which is to increase our number of subscribers. I mean, that's our job. I think that the thing for me is, you're asking these editorial teams to do more things, right? So, if you think going back to the customer again, like things like, an indexable timeline, key moments, recap, whatever we want to call it, they're kind of table stakes now. I mean, that's not innovation, that's an expectation from the customer that it's there. What do you mean I can't come into a game 20 minutes late and just find out what's happened? Like, maybe that's how I want to consume it, and maybe that's where I see the real value. So things like that are table stakes. And then we talk about altcasts and all of this kind of stuff. And, of course, YouTube are going to win in that space in terms of scale, right? Stick the NFL with Mr. Beast or Speed or whatever, of course. So, but what can we do when we have a user base that finishes 75, 80, 85 and starts at 9 or 10, right? So how do you create an experience that works for all of those audiences? And to try and do that manually and create 4 or 5 different versions of the same stream is just hard. It's just hard. You're asking the same team to do 5 different things. So, what we've done is try to invest in those tools that drive the biggest impact. Things like our key moments, we can roll those out across multiple sports in multiple languages in different countries. Things like rapid recaps, it needs to be more than just stitching those key moments together, because that's not a particularly good edit if you're paying us £30 a month. So I think as long as we are working on tools that make that editorial team's job either easier or they don't have to do the same thing for different things 5 times, I think that works for us, yeah.
You have a unique position in that you're also working across the US and what TNT are doing there. Do you see a different attitude in the US? Are we behind in Europe? Are we ahead in Europe?
I honestly don't think we're behind. From everything that I've seen, other people may have a different view. I think we're all in roughly the same place. Obviously, some sports are different, right? A highlights service from the NBA is very different than a highlights service from the Premier League. A 0-0 draw versus a 90-86 points event. There's a lot of different type of content that's produced, and so I think for the automation of those highlights, they have been more advanced just because of the sheer volume. But everything that I see, I think we're in a decent place. I mean, if you look at what ESPN have just launched, it's a good app. It's a good app with good stuff in it, but I don't think there's anything that we haven't seen in these markets.
Louise, you've been through this change with DAZN, with now Eurovision. Where do you think the biggest gains in efficiency have been that you've seen over that period?
I think AI driving personalisation of the app is critical to what David said. I think, you could now go onto an app and be served what you want to watch, what you traditionally engage with. And AI plays a massive role in that. Just the efficiencies of not having teams running, apps in languages, apps in, I only follow Premier League or I only follow rugby or whatever your thing is. The metadata that you can gather and the algorithms that you can gather from your consumers allow you to drive a personalised feed. And to me, that's one of the biggest innovations that I think we have got to use, because people are impatient. They don't want to log on to an app and scroll through tons of stuff to try and find something to watch. When it happens to me, I can tell you now I close the app because I don't have the attention span to find something. Whereas if I go on Netflix and they say, you've watched this, you're going to enjoy this, I will watch the trailer. I might not watch the series there and then, but I will watch the trailer. And so by serving up content that people will engage with, you're just almost guaranteed that engagement level. And I think that what AI can do to serve up that personalized app experience is groundbreaking, because the efficiencies that you can make across that, and also make it really personalized. I am a certain team, I don't want to watch one team against another. I want to watch this team. I want content about this athlete. So being able to create content and serve content around what my algorithm, what I'm interested in, is critical. And I think AI allows people to do that at scale, in multiple languages across multiple territories. And that's where I think for global companies, it's a game changer.
Just to build on that, I did some research before I came in here, and I was like, well, this is what we're doing. What's everybody else doing? Are we behind the curve? Is there FOMO? Are we ahead of the curve? And I saw a piece of research that a guy called Dan Rayburn, if any of you are familiar with him, had done. I think you guys you've had him on the podcast. And he did a piece. I think he interviewed close to 200 execs, OTT execs, streaming, sports leagues, etc. And the question was are you using AI in your video workflow? I think 68% of them said no. I think 18 said yes, and the rest said, yeah, we plan to. Read into that what you like, but I think the single biggest use case was content discovery. And I go back to what we said at the start, when we are trying to make sports live within a much broader entertainment experience and give that customer all of that choice, the more that we can use those signals to optimize that experience is a real opportunity for us.
Mihir, what about, we all talk here as we're complete converts. What are the misconceptions about AI that you come up against?
I mean, look, I think we all are have been swept up by the hype and wave of AI. I think from my standpoint, a lot of people think that AI is going to we're going to get into this autonomous world where everything is being served up to you by AI, so to speak. And to me, I mean, I have two kids, 6 and 3. I'm scared of what the world looks like in 20 years from now. But if that's what the reality is, but like I personally believe AI should be more of a helper rather than someone who's going to replace. This conception that AI is going to replace all jobs. We see it on our own day-to-day, right? Like from I'm running a startup. How many people are we hiring? I don't think it's taking away jobs. I think it's making your existing team members do more, do better. Now, does that mean that I may not need to hire as many people if the same person has superpowers? Like, that's probably true. But from a perspective of like, especially in our industry, AI can do things on its own is just not going to happen. I mean, you talked about the Hindi use case in boxing. If even the biggest tech companies' translations or automation from using AI is going to miss the nuance, is going to miss the context, which for a discerning audience, which the younger audiences especially are, but even the older audiences are, it just doesn't work. You have to adapt it. You have to train those models on specific things that are key to that sport in that country, in that language. It's not just translate how this sport is consumed or translate how this language, go from English to Hindi. It's listening to boxing in Hindi. I mean, I would love to listen to the Imagine translation in Hindi, and maybe Peter, you can tell us with your Hindi knowledge how well it did. But I think that's the one misconception in my mind is that it's going to be autonomous and we're going to just replace everything. I don't think that's the case. On the other hand, though, people go on the other extreme. Oh, it's hallucinating. Oh, it's not accurate. Well, it's not supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to make your life easier. Don't throw away the good, the okay with everything else. From my perspective, that's where the adoption needs to be.
On the it's not perfect thing, the best quote I always use about AI is, "This is the worst that AI will ever be," right? And it will learn. Because we've got a very tech-savvy audience, you clearly don't need the instruction that there's a QR code there to submit questions because we've already got our first few questions in. Just running through some of them. I'm going to pin on you, Louise, because you mentioned Nickelodeon and the NFL. One of the questions is, you mentioned SpongeBob and how it engages a new audience. How can you shed more light on how this engages new audiences?
I don't have the viewing data, so I don't know. But I do think that offering kids a more kids-focused feed will keep them in front of the TV longer. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is a whole other question. I was hoping you were going to ask me the next one, which is about the duration of the content. And
you're allowed to answer that as well. So the question, just so in case someone can't read it, is right behind your head.
I think the interesting thing is we all thought, even just 2 years ago, that it was about snackable content, and I hate that word. It's not. Because they're watching full live streams with creators watching a football match. So I think it's a myth that their attention span is short. I think all our attention spans are shorter because we're all addicted to our phones. But I think if you're putting something that's interesting on the phone, people are staying on the phone. So I don't think that it is about duration. I think it's about engaging content where they feel part of the event and not just sitting back and watching someone serve them something. So I do know that for F1, they are getting more engagement across that piece that they're doing. I don't, again, have the numbers, but I think you are creating a bespoke feed that doesn't have an adult theme to it. It's based on what the kids want to watch, and if you can bring their world into a sporting world, then you're uniting their interests, and therefore that kind of cross-pollination of interest happens. And to me, I think it's a great way to get kids into sport now.
I mean, I can just quickly add to that. I think that was step one, right? NFL putting the stuff on Paramount, then Disney did the same thing by using their own IP in it, and it brought a lot of brand sponsorship integration in there. I know Sony is working a lot through Beyond Sports on this stuff. But it was step one. Step 2, 3, 4, now you're bringing the creators in there. Now you're giving an NFL game internationally to speed to comment on. So I don't think like that one thing changed behaviors. It brought a different type of audience into the world of NFL, and now you're keeping that audience by giving the content to the creators that they watch the most on YouTube, and doing these co-viewing things with Speed and Mr. Beast and stuff. So I think for me, I think it's a series of experiments rather than one thing that drove a meaningful change.
Dave, is that fair of what you're doing at WBD? You're looking at a series of experiments, and do you recognize that question as something that you're asked in terms of your normal job? Won't the younger gen grow up out of short and sharp content?
I mean, ask that question. I mean, no one in here is 10 years old, right? And I bet we're all consuming short form video in some case. But I think the Olympics is a really good example of like how we covered all of that choice, all of those audiences and all of those different consumptions. I mean, I could spend a whole session on the Olympics. So just quickly, you know, we had 7 billion minutes streamed to 7 million users just on our platforms. But across the piece, we had 5 influencers in Paris with access to the venue, courtside, trackside, poolside, creating content for their platform and our platform. We had highlights and reels and replays of every different event. And our customer promise is that we will, you know, we will offer you all of the Olympics and you will never miss a moment. And for me, that moment could be watching the 100 meters live. But for you, it could be, you know, watching a short reel on your phone or watching something. I mean, we had kind of Robbie from Arsenal Fan TV there, like, you know, trackside. It kind of, like, it's trying to meet all of those audiences in the right areas where they are, but finding balance with the, you know, ultimate aim is to bring them back to us to watch the whole thing. So I don't think people won't grow out of that. Like, it's just where it is and how you have to adapt your content.
Yeah, I was going to say just on that, the short content definitely works, as in real-time clipping of live events, but everything is driving back to the live ultimately, because that's where your main engagement comes from. I do think that when it comes to highlights, it's shorter the better, because people don't want to commit the time. No one goes back and watches a full football match. We know that. You can enhance it as much as you want, but ultimately, unless it's curated or narrated in a different way, people just won't commit that amount of time anymore. So there is definitely a place for the short content, and that isn't going to go away. But equally, there's a place for the longer form content as well.
The next question was something that you mentioned in passing, Mahir, which is about editorial roles. Because clearly you can see how a lot of the digital workflow is improved by AI. How do you envisage the future of editorial roles in the world of AI?
Augmented is probably the easiest way to put it. I mean, one of the things that we've started talking to a lot of the broadcast partners are you know, can we? I've used this example a lot with when I'm talking to during my pitches. But you know, let's just assume there's a Man U Liverpool game going on. You know, Liverpool gets a red card. Jamie Carragher loses his mind. He's with Neville. Like, here we go again. This happens every time. 10 years ago, we were in the same position. The referee gave a red card to Liverpool. The game changed. Now, in this context, normally you would have had like a sports guru or an analyst sitting in the truck, scouring through all the archival footage to find that right moment. I think AI can do that today. That transcript can be a prompt into the LLM. It can look into your DAM and MAM systems. It can pull out the highlight, because it's all tagged with metadata at this point in time. They can find the clip and make it available to the producer. From that point on, it's up to the editorial team to decide what to do with that content. Do you want to send it as a push notification on your phones? This is what Neville Carragher, or put it up on Instagram, or do you want to show it on your broadcast feed? Give it to the commentators as something that they can laugh about during the halftime programming? I think from my perspective, I think it just allows the editorial team to be more creative rather than spending time on just the searching of the content. And I think that, to me, I actually think there's a lot of cool stuff that can come out from a broadcasting and from a consumption standpoint for using that editorial workflow.
Mahir, thanks a lot. We've got lots of questions that we haven't got the time to ask, so can I just encourage you to badger the members of panel off the stage when they get off there. But it's been great to have you all, and much appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that first conversation led by Peter Hutton. Again, I think it's a really great conversation to hear from some of the major European broadcasters and things that they're doing in terms of utilizing AI to enhance the broadcast experience. Now, as mentioned at the top of the show, It's an opportunity for me to sit down with the former number one NBA overall draft pick, Greg Oden, as he talks about his role and investment in AI. So, I'm very excited today. Those that don't know, if you're a listener to the StreamTime Sports podcast, to get another shameless plug, you'll know that I'm very proud of my Ohio roots. So I'm very excited to share the stage with someone who also has currently living in Ohio, not originally from Ohio, but not too far away in Indiana. So anytime two people from the great state of Ohio can represent, I'm always excited about that, Greg.
Go Bucks.
Yeah. Oh, an OH? There we go. See, we're everywhere. So very excited about this with the SportsPro AI event today. Multiple different facets of AI. We're going to be talking a little bit more specifically around performance with AI and some of the work that you're investing in. But before we get there, Richard alluded to it, and some people won't be shocked given your stature. You are a former NBA number one overall draft pick, basketball career, but maybe just talk a little bit about your transition going from being a full-time athlete to being an investor and sort of what sparked that interest for you in technology, and then as well perhaps a little bit specifically around AI and sports.
Well, everybody, thank you for listening to me speak, by the way. My first time here in London, but I'm Greg Oden, former number one pick, as he said. Had a 6-year NBA career plagued by a lot of injuries. And after I retired, I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do, but I know I wanted to stay around basketball. So I kind of basically did every job you can possibly do at a college. I was a student manager. I was the student coach. I was a grad assistant. I was the water boy. Then came to assistant coach, and then I coached in college for 2 years as well. And I also mentor and train kids. So one thing I've always heard about is AI. And I was definitely scared of it, by the way. I don't trust giving my phone any of my passwords, even though it already has it. But I do know it's not going anywhere. And when I was coaching, just getting into things that would make my life easier, I was a video coordinator. So to go into AI and work with companies that's going to make my life, less time consuming was kind of what I wanted to do. And I really appreciate the company that I'm working with now because they're very, very, I guess, easy for a guy that's not as technological sound. So, I'm pretty happy where I'm at right now and representing AirPlay.
And one thing I will say, I forgot to mention it. It's probably been mentioned throughout the event, but just a good reminder. If you use the event app, the SportsPro event app on Swap Card, there's the Q&A section there. So if at any point, there it is, perfect. I'm sure they'll flash this a couple times through. If at any point you do have any questions, feel free to include those on there, and I will eventually promise I will save some time to be able to go do that. So I guess, maybe just a little off piece now. I promised Larry I wouldn't, but here we go. So you're talking about, trying to onboard yourself into the AI space. There's lots of intelligent people out there. There's a lot of abbreviations for crazy different things. Maybe just how you started to just engage with AI as a topic to start to build sort of your understanding of it, or at least your familiarity and comfortability with the topic.
Well, at first, the only AI I think about is Allen Iverson, by the way. That's
Sure.
the only
Good
one I
reference.
acknowledge. But I also just trying to make life easier. As I said, being a video coordinator, I spent hours and hours cutting up film for games, for practices, for scouts. And just being able to use something that's going to make your life easier. I was in the gym from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. So if I can do something and take a couple of hours, I got a family. So, on the coaching side, it's definitely something that helped me out to just make life a lot easier and understandable, because I bet you a lot of coaches, y'all don't know this, but the video coordinator is doing all the work. The coaches and the guys getting paid the most money are just sending all that stuff to the guy that's just going to sit in the gym for 12 hours cutting up film. So it did make life easier for me.
Yeah. In terms of AI, I think there's obviously a lot of talk about it. I mean, we're hosting an event over the next 2 days, so clearly it's a thing. But even we look back just 5 years ago, coming out of COVID, NFTs for a brief moment were a really big thing, and we sometimes see tech trends come up, they pop up, they disappear just as quickly. I guess for you, sort of how you differentiate AI perhaps from some of those other things in terms of its ability to be long-lasting, that it isn't just a another hype train that people are jumping onto it? Like, how do you view AI in that aspect?
Well, I mean, it's not going anywhere. Anything to make any part of life, to solve a problem, that's going to be here for a long time. And I guess just the smarter it gets, as we know, it learns, it gets better by the day. So we know it's not going anywhere. And so I'm just going to be here to jump on the train, by the way. And also, I do got a question. What happened to NFTs? The fact that he just said that, I was really like, what happened to that, by the way?
I can talk about it. Like, I'm pretty bullish on NFTs still. I know that they've kind of failed a little bit. So Rare, if you don't know, it is one of my favorite Web3 examples. It's doing well. It's an NFT-based fantasy soccer game. I do think NFTs will work out. I think the issue is there's a lot of people that wanted to make money off of less educated people, and they did. So now I think it has a bit of a bad stigma, but I think it'll work because we know that people like to collect stuff. You think about like trading cards, Pokemon cards, like people collect stamps. So we know people like to collect stuff. We know people are willing to spend money to collect stuff. So I do think at some point it'll bounce back. But for the moment,
I mean, it got a lot of my money. I just don't know where it's at right now.
Fair. In terms of AI, and particularly for you, you're obviously going to have a lot of opportunities. Just given your name, people are going to be, maybe they go via Larry, whoever, trying to get a hold of you. You're going to have a lot of opportunities presented to you in terms of where you spend your resource. How do you kind of go through that list of things that people are approaching you to say, this is something of interest of me, this doesn't quite feel right? Like, how do you go about evaluating all those different opportunities?
Well, excuse me, as any opportunity, you got to look at the people. You want to work with great people. And then for me, looking at the product, like, does the product solve a problem? As an airplay, I think they're based around that question first when they come to a company. It's, how can I help you solve this problem that you're bringing to me? And when you're working with a company like that, that actually cares about problems and solving it and the people that they are, I think that's the kind of company anybody would love to work with. And hopefully they don't take your money.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing, we held a virtual roundtable with a group of investors, and that was one of the questions is sort of what's your investment thesis when you go to look at things. And the thing I thought was really interesting is all of these people, Courtside Ventures, Bruin Capital, top of the top, none of them ever actually mentioned technology as being their first priority. Their first priority was what you just mentioned there, is when it comes to looking to invest, it's about what's the relationship with the founders. Do they have a degree of integrity? Are they passionate about their project in the terms of they want to develop something for the good as opposed to just trying to find the money at the end of it? So it is interesting, even from your perspective, that you're agreeing with those, high level, private equity, capital venture, talking about the most important thing is the people.
Yeah, just being a basketball player, your life, you're the business. Everything centers around you when you're an NBA player. So I kind of look at it as that sense. And for me, I'm just a good person, so I want to work with good people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If we're going to spend life together, it might be with people we enjoy. So you're working with, you mentioned Airplay, but there's also Cerebro AIQ, I think, which all sit under the same umbrella. So maybe perhaps, we've kind of talked a little bit more about your thoughts with AI generally, some of the stuff you're invested in, but maybe talk a little more specifically about those companies, what they're doing, and what's the technology, what is the problem they're trying to provide a solution for?
So I would kind of say, to make it simpler for everybody, a Google for sports data. So if you're getting highlights and you want to know what makes LeBron James great, or what's his percentage of going left that he's going to do to going right, what makes him good at that, you can just type that in and then clips will pop up. And another thing that they do is they have the biggest women's database, and they actually work with officiating. And also they have soccer/football, which I'm learning. So, but no, like, as I say, as a coach and as a player, you can learn from that. So if I'm training the kid and I just want to show him, all right, this would make Kevin Durant great, I can type that in and all these clips can pop up and you can learn from that. As a coach, if I want to say what play does the team score the most buckets in, they are going to give me the top 3 plays and have clips of all those plays. And so it just makes it easier for people like me to get better, and it actually shows the whole picture. Just not seeing the numbers. You'll be able to understand the numbers from these clips.
Yeah, well, I would encourage you to go check out the website. I did myself to do a little bit of background. And when he talks about it being the Google of kind of basketball, like it very much is that in the sense of I watched the demo video where it's sort of like, hey, can you show me the percentages of Kevin Durant doing X, Y, Z? You can go do that. And then you can say, hey, can you go compare it next to Dwayne Wade? It can go do that. And then I thought the other interesting part was some of the infographics, because I am eventually going to come back to about like the visualization of data. But like quite literally, the way he describes it is exactly how it is. You can go ask any basketball-related question, any sort of stats and figures, and it pulls it up. So if you're trying to envision it, it is like using ChatGPT, except you're just talking strictly basketball, mentioning you're expanding that into other sports. But yeah.
Well, I would say I would advise you all to go to the website and type in, why was Greg Oden amazing?
Yes.
And then it would pop up and show a lot of dunking videos. So,
Oh, let's not forget about your interior defense as well, you know. One of the things, so this is performance data. So there's the one side of it where it could be applicable for coaches, whether that's recruitment, trying to find players. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, again, shameless plug of the StreamTime Sports podcast, we talk quite a lot about media and content really being at the heart of that. And I think when I think about fans, the word is short for fanatics, trying to super serve fans, and a lot of that has to do with, it could be betting, it could be fantasy sports. Fans want as much data as they possibly can. And are there any ideas behind your guys' side of what you're doing about how you potentially take this resource, not just limit it from a coaching, a scouting perspective, but also how you can start taking some of that visualization and start putting that into more of a media space so media businesses can also tap into this?
yeah, and I think I just mentioned it, but basically taking the numbers and giving a better picture of that. I mean, it's going to make sports media guys' lives a lot easier. You can pick up why a team is dominating and how they got this many assists, and you can explain that with these clips by just popping up, and it's going to make your life easier.
Yeah, I'm trying to think even, I think things like Second Spectrum, had their start in the NBA doing that sort of visualization.
And I think airplay is more detailed than Second Spectrum and sports code and synergy. I just think it helps everybody in the media, as I say, coaches, players, and it makes it easier again for people who are not tech savvy.
Yeah, well, not to
like the fans, by the way.
Yeah. Not to put you under too much pressure to talk about the tech side of things, but you mentioned it did start with basketball, but you're expanding into other sports. Kind of just talk about is what much you can, just sort of how you start to do that, because obviously you'll taught the model basketball, how you go about sort of incorporating that into new sports and expanding.
So when you see it, there's an upload factor in there. So you can upload any type of games, and then honestly, the AI will turn that around, and you can produce clips from as many clips as you can upload to give you numbers in that sense. So, okay. So it's actually really easy, and adding the AI factor, it just makes the turnaround time just so much quicker.
Yeah, so we talked about the performance side, and we just had a workshop here, and one of the questions was around, is AI capable of creating human emotional content as a machine? And I think one of the things that would be interesting when we're talking about performance data, yes, there's historical data, analytics to kind of talk about performance, but I think we also kind of know that, I promise we'll get to questions. As a player, we know some dudes that are absolute ballers. They got a 44-inch vertical. They do this and the other, but, we're Final Four, March Madness, all of a sudden the crowd's a little bit loud. They start to fade off a little bit. In terms of that human element, there are things we can measure. How would you say this AI tool is able to maybe account for some of the more human elements that, the intangibles, I believe coaches call that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say AI can take over the human element. I'm a player, so I always have that feel. You just feel it when you're like that. But I think AI, and especially airplay, can just give you such a bigger picture to explain why you can do these type things. So, like, for me, it's like, why was I such a good-looking, dominating basketball player? It's going to give you all these clips to explain that, but it can't tell you why I wanted it more. That's what the humans can do.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I don't want all jobs to be replaced. I coach American football over here, so I don't want a robot, and I'm taking my job because I do love coaching. So I'm glad to hear it's not going to take all the roles. Another one just wanted to talk about, and this would be, I guess, maybe more of an American-focused one at the moment, but there are things like Project Red Card over here, essentially the ownership of player data, and then thinking about NIL in the States. Are there potential opportunities for players to be able to take this sort of data and then use that in conversations to say, hey, I think my NIL deals could be worth X, Y, Z, or using that towards sponsorship? Again, trying to figure out how we can take this performance data, but not just limit it to one vertical. Do you see this potentially being an impact for players to be able to use in those conversations?
Yeah, just coming to the negotiating table. I'm going to back up any of your opinions, any of your thoughts with facts and with actually visual things to show that. So that number may be a little bit higher, or maybe you can get it a little bit higher because I can show you exactly why I'm worth this, why I can bring something better to the team, why I play well against, your worst rival, just all those things being said and shown, I don't actually have to say much. You can't just think all this. I got the proof to back it up.
Awesome. And if we could, I'll just ask the production, if you could put the questions down here so I can save my neck a little bit, that would help. Don't worry, we're gonna put them right here in front of this comfort monitor in front of us. But I guess we could talk about first one while they pull it up. Your biggest challenge transitioning from being an NBA player, being a part of a team, to being a business leader. What are some of the skill sets you had to learn, challenges, surprises along the way?
Yeah, I think a lot of players, the one thing that we do, we play basketball from the time we're kids to the time we retire. And then we have to learn a whole nother part of life that we probably didn't dedicate our lives to. Honestly, I had to sit back and think, like, what do I even like to do outside of the game of basketball? And then I had some great mentors in my life to help me understand this business side of the world. So it's basically relearning life again, because you dedicate so much of your time to this one thing, and then when it's done, and for me, it was done at 27. So I've retired twice from different things, which is crazy to say. But, when you got good people around you and you ask questions and you just learn things throughout life, it's going to help you in that next chapter.
Absolutely. And I will also say anybody who's ever brave enough to put their name on the question, you will always jump to the front of the queue. So I can see Roger here has actually, been brave enough to put his name out there. So with this question, is there a specific, move to the top. Is there a specific stage, sector, or founder profile that excites you the most? I mean, I think we talked a little bit about you like to work with good people, but in terms of other profiles, just in terms of where they're at and, their funding, their startup process, just anything you're particularly looking at?
I guess the solving a problem, if it's, problems that people have, if a company can solve that, I mean, that's just something that everybody wants to do, because that's just thinking differently, and that's going to move that company, up really quick.
Next one here. How much can performance AI grow, given it may already be a bit overcrowded with startups? So I guess when you're looking at AirPlay and you're speaking to companies, and I mean, this is a question I was probably going to ask anyways, is like, what's that conversation like when you're speaking to other potential investors, whether that be rights holders in leagues, whether it be bigger investors? How are you kind of talking about where you sit specifically in the space and kind of what your unique selling point is?
Well, it's AirPlay. Like, literally, it's like we just talked about, Second Spectrum, Synergy, Sports Code. It's better. It's quicker. Adding that AI component just makes it so much faster. And as somebody that actually sat there and cut up the film and worked with all those things, that's just something that, like, I'm excited about when I talk about it, because I know how many hours I had to sit there and work with that stuff. So just to make it so much easier and make everybody's lives easier, I think that's one of the big things that I feel about AirPlay.
Fun. And then looking at this question, an interesting one. Let's say we went back in time. We went back, it was 2007? 2007, you're going through the draft process. How do you think that would have potentially changed your preparation for things, knowing if you had that level of data, how you would have gone about things if this existed back when you were going through this process?
I mean, I think it would have been like, some film study. Like, I would be looking at other players. What would make Dirk Nowitzki, the best shooter, so I would probably took some of that and actually add that to my game during the draft process. Or why Shaq, well, obviously he's just big. Yeah. But,
Says something coming from you.
Like Amari, Yao Ming, guys like that. What do they do differently that I do that I can add to my game? I think that would just help in that process.
Awesome. Well, Greg, I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate you flying over here to London to spend some time with us. I know it's your first trip. I hope it's not your last trip. I try to give you and Larry some recommendations. I recommended Borough Market for anyone that's around London. I'm a foodie. I love Borough Market. If you have any other food recommendations for Greg and Larry while they're here, I'm sure they'd love to have them. But thank you, Greg. It was a pleasure to get to talk to you. Got to watch you play growing up, so kind of a moment, I know they say don't meet your heroes, but it was very great to get to share the stage with you.
I appreciate that so much. Thank you all for listening to me. I wish I was smarter, but you guys should all go check out Airplay. It's a great company, and it's going to help change the game, especially for a lot of athletes, coaches, and just people in that sports data.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.